These battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody wrong. When people speak with their mind, getting so much resistance from behind. We got to stop the children. What's that sound? Everybody look, it's going down.
Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Robust Opposition. I met Michelle through Callie Warner, who's an activist here in Asheville who has saved some trees in her time. And she told me I had to meet Michelle and talk to her about the wonderful work that she was doing in Brevard County, Florida. So we had some conversations back in June, and I gave her a little bit of advice on this project. And I was really happy to find out in September that she was very successful. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Michelle and talk about what she was successful doing. And let's start by talking about your background, because you're not a professional organizer or activist, either as a paid person or even as a volunteer. This is the first time you've done anything that would be considered political organizing. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And I wanted to thank you again, Lauren, for inviting me on the show. I really do appreciate it. I'll say I certainly am not a political activist. I don't have anything to do with politics, but it so happens you actually have to face the political parties at times in order to be heard. I also, please, if you'll permit me, I wanted to just say thank you to all of those people around the globe, around the county that serve to help. I'd be nowhere without all of the community who pulled together to help. At your advisement, a number of those organizations certainly had a huge impact and pivotal impact on the decision that was made in the final last few months.
Well, I want to thank you for being so humble, because I was thinking about that when I wrote the title of the show, because it never is just one person, but oftentimes there is a lead organizer. And in my time being an activist, I've been the lead organizer on several campaigns. And I always thank the people that, I work with and all the other organizations. So thank you for being so gracious. So my first question to you, tell us about your professional and volunteer background before we get into the cause.
I am a nurse with an MBA, a businesswoman who got into healthcare IT, did a tremendous amount of operational, strategic, and development work with healthcare information technology companies as it relates to hospitals and the care of patients. With respect to other avenues I've taken, I certainly am proud to represent H. Lee Moffitt, sit on their board, serve as a patient advisor, patient and family advisor, as well as a passion of mine, animals. And so I volunteer as well for lab rescue. And I'm a big advocate of green spaces. So I've been simply volunteered to spearhead this initiative as the CEO and president, formed a coalition. And again, it's just one girl who's stepped up to try and do what's right by the community to save and preserve natural habitat in a beautiful area where we live.
So what were you notified about 3.5 years ago that caused you to jump into action?
The community in general in this particular area, Rockledge Drive in Rockledge, Florida, were notified by Brevard County, and it was an undated letter, and that letter indicated that they were going to do some trimming of trees. And at that time, if we had any questions, we should contact the arborist of the county, which I did. I asked for a meeting. Upon meeting the arborist, it was quite different story in person. He actually had said that the community, while they may be unaware, that Brevard County had the right to actually take the trees all the way down. They were planning on trimming the canopies, but they were also planning on removing a number of the live oak trees. These are 200- and 300-year-old oak trees. And I think the first thing that came out of my mouth without thinking further was, over my dead body. Why wasn't this communicated to the community in the letter? And why wasn't the letter dated? So that's where it all began.
Okay, now let's talk about the importance of these trees, because a lot of people might say, okay, you live on this block, there's some beautiful trees. This is just an NIMBY issue. I mean, you're just concerned about ruining the beauty of your neighborhood and the property values and all this stuff. Why are the trees so important beyond just what they provide for your personal satisfaction?
Right. So good question. And certainly I can see where some may think that that is the case. In fact, these trees were Florida designated a legislated scenic drive. They line the Indian River Lagoon, which runs east of the road, Rockledge Drive. And it is an area of wildlife habitat, insects. It protects, all of these trees protect the Indian River Lagoon. It protects from water runoff. It also hosts a tremendous amount of tourist events, to name a few: Space Coast Marathon, which is a Boston qualifier, triathlons, biking events, and of course, people come from all around to drive the road. It's traffic calming. It's a beautiful road that is embraced by the canopy of these oak trees with the lacy, beautiful mosses that hang down. And of course, it helps with retention. It helps with erosion. It prevents runoff into the Indian River Lagoon to protect the dolphins and the manatees. So it really is a historical and a heritage gemstone of Brevard County. In 1887, Rockledge, city of Rockledge, it's the oldest city in Brevard County. And in 1992, it was actually designated as a scenic district. So there's a tremendous amount of history for this area. It is one of only 6 in the state of Florida, the scenic drive. And so it is something that we are trying to preserve as the community in its entirety for many to come and enjoy. And of course, let's not forget future generations to enjoy these beautiful trees. And there's a million reasons to save the trees. Those are just to name a few. It certainly helps with our air. It helps with the ground temperatures. It helps with carbon dioxide. I could just sit here for an hour and talk about what and why we should preserve such beautiful resources. But it also helps protect our homes from Hurricane 4 scale winds. And so there's many reasons why these trees and this particular road should stay protected and preserved.
Okay, so back in 2018, when you got this notice, what was the first thing that you did to try to mobilize people?
The first thing I did was start an online petition. I thought my reach would be farther. And so that's where I began. The second order of business, I believed, was to address the press, not just the newspapers, but also several of the stations. The TV stations were responsive and had an interest in the story.
So when you found out that these tactics, you know, the obvious tactics with the petition and the press didn't work at first, what did you do in 2019 to up the game a little bit?
I really believed that this was quite simple. I believed that naively that everybody felt the same way, that this just required a conversation, and I would go shake the hand of the commissioner and the team up at the county, and they would understand the important resource of the trees and the road and the preservation and the heritage, and that's not exactly what happened. And I actually did have, and I thank again Brevard County and the community there for rallying around, but the people were not being heard despite the press. And I do appreciate Florida Today, and I appreciate Fox News and News Channel 13 covering the story, but it required legal representation. And what I was surprised about is when I did inquire locally, there were so many fearful attorneys. I was actually ashamed for them. There was conflict of interest and fear of local government. So I went from calling 25 attorneys in Brevard County to being referred to Orlando, and from Orlando to Tampa, and Tampa to Jacksonville, and finally found someone who had a set of stones to step up and who believed enough in our environment to serve to help us. And that changed the game. He was just saying what we were saying, but in a little more direct and a very litigious approach.
Did he write a stern letter to the county commissioners? Did he threaten a lawsuit? What was the result of getting the lawyer involved?
You know, he was trying to stop them from proceeding, because I think I had felt that if it was just I and it was just the community that were coming together, we didn't have the strength to stop it. So I think initially he just put a stop, an immediate stop to the process, with a threat that we may, as a community, move forward with a lawsuit. Yes. So, and I believe it was helpful and impactful to have that information, attorney to attorney. It was the attorney representing the Rockledge Drive Tree Coalition to the attorney of Brevard County, and things began to shift and change. We were then being heard.
You told me in some pre-interview that what started out as a broad interest turned into an ego-based personal vendetta. Who were you talking about, and what did you mean by that?
Well, you know, as much as I'd like to think that it was going to be an easy conversation for an individual, and my position, and I believe I spoke on behalf of the community, is it wasn't about me, and it wasn't about him being the specific commissioner who was driving the initiative. I figured I'd go shake his hand, introduce myself on behalf of the community, tell him how wonderful and why we were trying to protect and preserve the trees, and ask if we could actually partner. And what I got was someone throwing up their hands in front of News Channel 13, saying that I was blocking his direct order to cut the trees down, and how dare I. And then that followed a few threats, unfortunately, and I was told that I was the enemy, and oh my gosh, what did I got myself into? But I think these things happen. You shouldn't fear. Be bold, stand up for what you believe is right, and suddenly you'll have a community of beautiful people stand up behind you who believe the same, and a strong attorney as well.
Now let's take this into 2020. The COVID pandemic hit, and we know how that affected the world. What happened that year to you that affected you personally? And also what happened with this case in 2020?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. I think the whole world learned a great deal through COVID. That is unprecedented times, and we all learned a great deal. I think we also grew and improved and were better for it, in my opinion. But I won't go so far as to get into that. I will say on a personal level, and I believe we spoke about this, and I'll be transparent and throw it out there. You know, COVID aside, my husband had gotten furloughed. We still had insurance, thank goodness. And I, just about a month after COVID hit, got laid off, and then got diagnosed with diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. which I did not see coming. So on a personal level, I was told I had a year to live or do chemo. So what do you do in that case? I wasn't thinking about the trees right at that moment, although I hoped to continue to look at them and hope that they would remain standing. I think I was fighting for my life, and COVID became a back seat to what was to begin a journey of trying to get through chemotherapy. And then, of course, 3/4 of the way through, I was blessed by the grace of God and many prayer warriors and spit and vinegar to find myself in remission. And along came yet another letter from the county. The last thing I wanted to do was fight that battle yet again. But you have to stand up for what you believe is right. And what I didn't want to do is leave this earth with those trees being plowed down, whether I was sick or not, hair or no hair. I was going to fight for the rights of the community and try and fight for the heritage and the historical Florida legislated scenic drive in our community.
Well, that's really wonderful to hear because, sometimes when people have that kind of scare and, we shared this when we talked, I was also diagnosed with stage 3 throat cancer back in 2008 and dropped everything to focus on getting better from that. After my treatment was over, which was pretty grueling, I was back in the saddle again, and it kind of made me what I got from it is I don't want to sweat the small stuff, but what we're talking about right now politically is more big stuff. So I got really involved in 2011 with the Occupy Wall Street movement, and it changed my life forever and gave my life a lot of meaning. And then I transitioned into the Bernie Sanders movement and ran LA for Bernie, was a delegate for him in 2016 at the convention. And then after that campaign did not work, I started this show called The Robust Opposition to focus on just people like you, organizers and activists who oppose things robustly that they think are very wrong. And it could be something very local, like something that's happening on your street as you're doing, to something international, like just say the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was an international trade agreement that I was focused on for a number of years. There's something about having a brush with death like that that makes you try to figure out what's important and how you want to dedicate the rest of your life.
I do believe you and I both share a trait. We're quite driven. And I don't believe that we fear much. But I do believe that we all should stand up for what we believe. You have to believe in something. You have to be passionate about something. And if not us, who? And each one of us can make a huge difference in the world. It's casting a small stone and it makes a big ripple. And you want to amplify that effort through just spearheading what you believe to be the right voice, the right initiative for whatever it is that you're fighting for. I think there's much each one of us as individuals believe worth fighting for. It's just a matter of finding the group who will stand behind and support the same efforts.
So when you and I talked in 2021, which was August of this year, or no, it was June that we talked, things were a little bit dismal. And I gave you some tips. I tried to give you the best of my knowledge. Do you remember what any of those tips were? And did you take heed of them? Did you implement them? Did they help?
They did help. And I thank you again for that. I think our strength comes from listening and applying the knowledge and wisdom from others who have been there, done that. I actually took your advice on a number of fronts, specifically around, if you have to face politicians, you have to become political. So I learned a little bit more about that, and also got involved with those who were a little and a lot more educated in the political processes. I didn't want to, but you have to educate yourself in their world. Gosh, I thought that the commissioners in Brevard County worked for us, and it turns out they believe we work for them. And so that was a little bit of a different spin. But I thank you for that. I also had a number of people willing to chain themselves, their grandchildren and children, to the trees and actually build a tree house if it were to come to that. So it's interesting, different branches of not just the community, but organizations that were involved in the history of our area, and in fact, National Scenic Byways out of Washington, D.C. The president there was willing to talk. So I went with much of a broader brush to speak with people outside the spaces I had originally reached for. And we delighted to have the president pick up the phone and call from Washington, D.C. to be willing to help where he could. And the same with Indian River Lagoon and some of the other organizations. So I appreciate your help. It did work to our advantage. So thank you.
Did you ever get in touch with the progressives in the Brevard County Democratic Party?
I sure did.
Did they have were they able to provide any help or advice?
They did help tremendously. In fact, one of the gentlemen, Matt Nyland, who is a neighbor as well, was a great keynote speaker at one of the rallies that I hosted. And in the pouring rain, we all stood under an umbrella and talked to the people about why it was so important to preserve, protect the trees. But he was a great historian, and he contributed greatly, not just for the party. And we all agreed it's nonpartisan. This is an interest of everyone, and it doesn't matter what color, what party. It doesn't matter what where you lie. What matters is that we all want to protect the trees. The trees, they belong to all of us. They belong to the people that come and run the marathon from 27 countries to 49 states, to just the local individual beautiful residents that live there. So yes, to answer your question, yes. They were all very helpful.
Now, in September, I was very gratified to receive your press release that you had won your fight. Tell us what this win looks like, and do you think that it's really over?
So I'd like to think that it's over, Lauren. And I think right now, where we stand is there was a press release that was addressing the community that they were not going to pursue pruning, trimming, or taking the trees, that they were refraining and abandoning that project. So I think the community and all of those who participated in trying to support the initiative, we do have a small win. I will say that this has gone on for close to 4 years. And, corruption or non-transparency has been the theme. And so I've gotten, as I think most CEOs and presidents will, is thoughtful people, mindful people, trying to give you some inside information, and there's not much you can do with it, right? So there's a lot of talk about some political interest, and it's all about the money with respect to developers and wanting to get on that road. And so they were paying off people. Listen, I can't do anything with hearsay, and I'd hate to think that that's the case. I'm sure it's not. But all I can do right now is hope and believe that Brevard County and those who represent the government locally have come to their senses in realizing that future generations are worth taking a look at all of the important reasons to keep the trees on that road, and all of the organizations who stood up and spoke on behalf of the value that it brings, and the Historical Heritage Society, who did a radio show specifically around that road and what those trees brought to our community, made a difference. I think and hope that it'll remain that way, and we won't hear that they're suddenly trying to put a sewer line down the road and we're starting this all over again in a year. So we shall see, because we only really have a today. So today we have a win, and grateful for all the support. And today, I believe, is a reason to celebrate. But as I had mentioned, just because of the lack of transparency, let's all stay together. We're stronger together, and keep an eye on what is being planned. And this way, we can have a voice at the table, have a voice at the meetings, to ensure that it doesn't go left when it should have gone right.
Now that you've had this win, has it inspired you to stay active and take on any other issues with the group of people that you've mobilized in your community, or are you done?
I have and will always remain committed to stand up for anything that I believe is worth fighting for. So I don't know that I'll ever be done. I think I will always be active in the community. I'd like to help some of the organizations that stood up and helped me with, whether it be the fluoride in our waters, whether it be, Indian River Lagoon and keeping it safe and protected, Sierra Club. There's so many organizations that have issues that need to be addressed, environmental issues that I believe are important. And I would say anyone else who believes strongly, has a passion about something, and realizes that something is not right. It only takes one person to hold someone accountable for something that's being done wrong, and give them a little knowledge, or at least a different perspective from someone else's lens on why they should reconsider what they're doing that could be harmful to our environment, or for any other purpose. If they're doing something harmful to a child, or harmful to an animal, or harmful to another human being, someone's got to step up. So it'll be me, and I hope that whoever's watching, your audience, it'll be them, because it only takes one person to spearhead an organization. And I will tell you, the community comes together. People, these beautiful people from all over the world, step up because they believe it as well. And who knew? Yeah. But I'm very inspired by all of the people. Don't give up. Keep going and fear nothing, because they're only people, right?
Right. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show tonight. We come to the end of our half hour, and I want to close the show with one quote that I think is applicable from the famous Margaret Mead. And she says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So thank you, Michelle. Thank you, viewers. Please share the show and keep fighting.